Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video, we are going to be playing with the new Painted Poppies stamp set, and I'm going to be doing some masking to create an entire card panel with some of these flowers and stems and leaves. And we're going to do it 3 times so that we can kind of get a little bit creative and color these poppies with the traditional red, but then I'm also going to change it up and color them with some kind of unexpected colors as well. So to do all of the stamping, I am going to be using my MISTI stamping tool. You don't need this tool to do this. I'm just doing it because I'm going to do multiple of one card design. So I find it quick and easy to have it in my MISTI so that I can stamp it onto a panel, switch it out for a new one and stamp it again, and continue that process for as many as you'd like to do. This is a really great way to mass produce a bunch of cards if you want to do the same design. It works really nicely for a card set or a gift if you want to do multiples of one of the same design on all of your cards. So what I'm going to be doing for the next little bit here is a bunch of stamping. So I'm going to start with this largest poppy here first, and I didn't really get a lot of ink on that first one there, so I'm going to stamp it a second time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp this, and I'm going to do it, like I mentioned, on some additional panels as well. So you'll kind of see me pull out this panel and bring another one in. And I'm going to kind of do that for all of the different stamps that I'm adding, and I'm going to do it on 3 different panels. So even if you're not seeing all of the panels being stamped, I am doing it on 3 panels each time. To do all of my stamping, I am using Extreme Black ink, and this is a Copic friendly ink, and I plan to use Copic markers to color all of my images, so this is a really great ink if that's how you're going to be coloring, and I really like how nice and dark and black it is. This is the stamp masking paper I'll be using, and what I'm doing is I'm just stamping the image onto all of the panels first, and then when I'm finished, I'm going to stamp it one more additional time onto this masking paper. And masking paper is just kind of like a really thin piece of paper that has a sticky adhesive on the back. And the adhesive is not so sticky that it's not going to remove, so you can easily apply this to your stamped panel, stamp over top of it to protect the image underneath, and then this comes off very easily and doesn't wreck any of the cardstock or the paper that you've adhered it to. So each time that I do stamp out a mask, I need to cut it out with my scissors, so I'm going to trim these up every time I stamp one. And I like to use just a small pair of scissors and cut very closely around the edge. I kind of go on the inside of the stamped line, which is going to ensure that I'm going to get a really nice mask that isn't going to leave any white gaps around the outside edge. And then once I have that cut out, I'm just going to go ahead and remove that backing, and I'm going to set the mask aside so it's ready to go when we want to add it to our project. So now that I have the mask created, I'm going to go ahead and put a panel back into my MISTI. I'm going to put that mask right over top, and I'm going to position my second flower. So what I'm doing by adding the mask is making sure that that big large flower we stamped first is going to be in the forefront of the design, and this second flower here is going to look like it's kind of coming out from behind that main flower. So I'm going to stamp this twice just to get a really nice impression, and I'm going to repeat the process for the other 2 panels. I love every time we take the mask off and get to see that scene kind of coming to life as we add all of the stamped images. Okay, so now we're moving on to our third flower, and for this one here, the stem is actually attached to it. So I'm going to kind of maneuver it so it kind of goes on an angle down towards the bottom, and that's just so I can kind of position my stem how I want it later when we add it to the bottom of the panel. And you can see with this one, it's definitely going to go through that largest flower, so I'm going to once again add my mask on there. And I'm just going to make sure for this one that I'm only adding the ink at the very top of the flower, since that's the only part that's going to stamp. I don't want to have any ink on the very bottom of the stem since it's kind of going out past that masked area. I don't want it to stamp onto the panel. So I stamp that on there. I'm going to remove that mask and then once again repeat that process on the other 2 panels. The next stamp we're going to use is this leaf design, and we're going to use this in multiple spots on this panel. So I'm going to start here with this top area since I already have the mask in place, and I'm going to position it so it's kind of peeking out from behind that flower. There are additional leaves in the stamp set, but I decided to use just the same style of leaf on this design, so I'm just going to use this one repeatedly throughout the whole design on the panel. So once I had that first one stamped, I'm going to put the masks onto both of the flowers since I'm going to stamp the second one kind of coming out from between the 2. So I'm just going to very carefully put both of those on and just overlap them. And then I'm going to stamp that leaf once again kind of coming out between those 2 flowers. I love that the size of it allows me to be able to kind of just stamp the end of it or just parts of it. It just kind of depends on the look I'm going for. So I can kind of turn it depending on what I want it to look like. Now for this flower here, at first I thought I was going to have it kind of hang off the bottom of the panel, which is why I shifted the panel up into the top corner of the MISTI, but I decided to leave it just on the panel as is. I didn't need to use any masks to do that stamping since I didn't overlap anything. But once I had that one stamped on there, I wanted to add an additional leaf, so I did add a mask to the center flower once again, And I flipped the panel upside down so that I could stamp this leaf going off of the panel. So you can see there I'm kind of stamping off onto my MISTI stamping tool. And that's perfectly fine. I can just wipe that up once I'm finished. Now the last thing I need to do is add all of my stems. And this is much easier to do just with an acrylic block. And I'm just adding these stems to my acrylic block, kind of turning them and angling them on the block how I want them to be positioned under the flowers. And then I'm adding the masks as needed so that I don't stamp the stems directly through the flowers. This goes pretty quickly since I can just kind of really quickly move the masks to each flower as I go and then just stamp that stem on there. Now once I had this finished, I decided that little space in the bottom needed something else, so I did add one additional leaf to the very bottom, and that is going to finish our panel. So keep in mind I did do this 3 times, so we have 3 of these to color now. So I'm going to very quickly start the coloring on this first one here. I'm not really doing anything super fancy. I'm using 3 shades of green for all of the leaves and stems. I'm not changing it up at all on any of the panels. I'm using these same 3 colors throughout. And I'm just going to start by layering down my lightest color first onto all of them. And then I'm going to come in with the darker and the medium shades and kind of add a little bit of contrast to all of those different layers. I like having the 3 shades to kind of add a little bit of shading in the areas that are kind of peeking out from behind the flowers. And it just gives them a little bit more definition and really helps to bring them to life, because they don't look so flat once you have a little bit of shading kind of added in there. Once I finish the leaves on this panel, I am going to color the very top poppy with some traditional reds, and I will leave that in the video. And that's pretty much all the coloring that I'm going to include. The video is quite long already, and I didn't want to have it be super long with all of the coloring, but it's just some basic 3-color blending once again, pretty much the same thing I did with the leaves. I'm just kind of doing the shading in the bottom areas and any parts of the flowers where they overlap and it would be a little bit darker. So I'm just kind of going in with my reds here and adding in the shading once I've already laid down that light color. Having the light color down first just really helps to saturate the paper, and it really helps you to really easily blend those colors together. So you can see there now I have this really beautiful, vibrant red poppy. And I'm just going to go along now and continue to color all of the rest of the flowers in the same way. And then I'm going to move on to 2 very non-traditional colors for poppies and color the other 2 panels as well. And I'll be back in just 1 second with all of these completely colored. Okay, so here we are. Now you can see that I have them all colored. Here's the red one we started with, and I did trim these down 1/4 inch on all sides, so these measure 4 inches by 5 1/4. And now you can see I have the traditional red, I have a really pretty aqua, and then I also have a purple. I figure if we have stamps, we have markers, we have imagination, we can create any type of color flowers we want. It doesn't matter if they're supposed to be red. I really like the look of kind of changing it up, and I love this card set once we had it fully finished. Now you can see here I have a die, and you might be wondering, what are you going to do with that? Well, I am actually going to cut right through this panel. So here are all 3 of the panels. I did all of that stamping, all of that coloring, and then I completely cut through the middle. But it's going to be fine. We're going to completely reassemble these, and we're going to kind of pop up that center area and spotlight that stamping to really make those flowers stand out. So I have pulled 3 coordinating shades of cardstock. I have grape jelly, wild cherry, and blue raspberry. And what I'm doing first is I'm adding the panel to my card base. And this is why I trimmed them down a tiny bit so that we would see that card base kind of peeking around the outside edge. And I'm adding this flat to the card base. Now for this middle panel here, I want to add this onto another piece of the same color cardstock, and then we're going to adhere it onto the panel with some foam adhesive. So I've cut the second piece of cardstock a little bit larger, and I'm going to add this directly on here, no foam adhesive yet. And then once I have this panel fully assembled, that's when we're going to add our foam adhesive so that we can pop this up off of the card. So when you add this on, you just kind of want to position it right in the center. And if you use the lines on the stamps, you can easily line this up so that the pattern is completely continuous from the background right through to the center area. I repeated this process on the other 2 panels, and now we have 3 completed cards which have the stamping that's continuous, but we have that really cool middle area that's raised on dimension and has the outline of that cardstock, really helping it to stand out. Now I want to add sentiments to this, so I am using the From All of Us and From Me to You stamp sets, and I've stamped out my sentiments onto some black licorice cardstock, trimmed them down into strips, and I heat embossed all of those sentiments in white. And now I'm just positioning them right over top of that center panel. And I'm adding them with foam adhesive as well so that they will easily kind of layer right over top of there. And I just kind of move them on the panel to change up the look a little bit. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do now is just add a few clear droplets to each of the cards. I love the look of these clear droplets with flower stamps. I just think they really mimic the look of water drops, and I think they make the card look really elegant when it's finished. And then once we have that done, we have 3 completed cards that all have the exact same stamp design, but we've changed up the colors to give them a little bit of a different look. Like I mentioned earlier, a card design like this works really nicely for a gift if you want to give a full set, because you can keep the same design, change up the colors and the sentiments, and have a variety of different occasions that you can include on these cards. So that is the video for today. I hope you got some ideas on ways that you can spotlight your stamping. I know it looks kind of scary to cut through that panel once it's finished, but I think it's so worth it in the end because it has that really cool look to it with that dimension and that kind of spotlighted area in the center. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video. I appreciate you being here and hope to see you in another video soon. Thanks for watching.